Greetings, fellow humans. I am Hugh.
And I am Man.
And together we are definitely not
Two
kobolds in a trench coat. We enjoy human activities, such as paying taxes,
Having existential crises,
and RPG horror stories. Let's see what we've got today. For today, we have a player who was asked to bring a knife to a game, a GM accused of misogyny because of a player's poor decisions, and a GM who never had any intention of letting the party win.
I was asked to bring a knife to a game by Reddit user Sleep Skull. I agreed to play a board game in my city, Blades in the Dark. I don't know the master. I don't know anyone. We're discussing it, and I'm already getting ready to go. And then the master says, "Take a knife with you to the game." I sit in bewilderment. A knife? No knife, no play. To be honest, I'm sitting in a little shock. I ask why the knife is needed, and the answer is, by whim, for the surroundings. I honestly answer that I'm a cowardly young girl and I would prefer not to go to a game with strangers that would involve interacting with some kind of weapon. To which I receive an answer, "Don't worry, I understand the risks. You won't get hurt. Certainly not from a knife." Honestly, the only risk I'm willing to take while playing board games is getting into a sugar coma from too many snacks. I refused and didn't go, but I'm still honestly in shock.
You won't get hurt, certainly not from a knife.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, that's so reassuring. 5 words you really didn't need to end that sentence with.
Nope.
Of course, that doesn't really change the danger here. That sentence just adds a lot of ominous intent to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get where the GM is coming from on this, because it's Blades in the Dark. I'm assuming that has to do with knives or something, some kind of weapon. So maybe he was just trying to go for a realistic experience?
Probably sounds like what would be done if you were to give them the maximum benefit of the doubt. Honestly, there's an equal possibility they intended to play a real version of Blades in the Dark afterwards.
Yeah, you never know with strangers on the internet.
Yeah, no, avoid at all costs. Don't go to any game where they actually ask you to bring a knife. Even if it is with the best intentions, it could so easily not be. That's not worth taking a risk for.
Yeah, if the GM was that gone on realism or whatever, then just, I don't know, go buy a bunch of prop knives.
Yeah, I would just avoid entirely.
Or cardboard knives or something that doesn't seem like it could actually do damage.
Yes, you don't want to risk your life being ended by a knife. Player thinks I am sexist for her character dying. By Reddit user ForeverDM247. Hello, it's me again, back at it with another horror story. So I'd run a game where the players were prisoners sent into a Shadowfell-like world to be banished. The characters were supposed to be deeply flawed people who may or may not change their ways, and may or may not be good or evil. The idea being that, like with any system, false convictions happen, and you may be a good person.
Actually a really interesting concept. We're all just sort of, maybe we're good, maybe we're bad. I don't know, I like it.
Yeah, I like the idea of being thrown into what is effectively another worldly prison dimension, and that's where you're going to be fighting your way out of or through and, well, campaigning through.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a good concept, a good clear objective, and does allow for a lot more moral grey areas.
Yeah, we love the moral grey areas.
One thing I told my players in session 0 and 0.5 is that combat in this campaign is a tool to be used carefully and cautiously. Most encounters are built with many ways to avoid it, and taking it on is always an option, albeit often the wrong option. So unless they're very confident, or have formed a plan, to never engage in combat with the creatures in this dimension. Things started off with a tiny red flag during the character creation. You'd played a monk who was flawless. When the campaign required, you have at least one major flaw, with more flaws giving you rewards for RPing them in-game. She built her character to be ultra noble, all about the greater good.
The greater good.
And doing the right thing and just generally being heroic. I allowed it because I thought that, whether by choice or by accident, that was an amazing major flaw for her character. She didn't list it as a flaw, and left the flaw area empty.
Oh, awesome. We have a Mary Sue right off the gate. And here's the thing, you can create a Mary Sue that actually is super flawed just by virtue of it being a Mary Sue character, if you play it right, but something tells me that's not what this player was planning.
Like OP says, they saw it as a potential flaw, being too noble and too intent on doing the greater good thing can lead you to make a lot of bad decisions. And particularly in this scenario when you're in a very questionable place.
I don't know what it is with people not wanting to have flawed characters, because it's really fun to play deeply flawed characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mainly focus on the flaws when I create characters.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I have one character who is really smart and thinks he knows a lot about anatomy. He's a lizard folk, but he thinks he knows a lot about the anatomy of mammals, but is actually really stupid about it and has a lot of misconceptions about it.
Yeah, he's basically a walking flaw.
And that's where the most fun is.
But it is where the best RP, like OP pointed out, is where some of the really good RP is when you have these flawed characters. Obviously, there's a limit. You know, we obviously have the people that take a little too far, but...
Fast forward a few sessions and the players are on a quest to find a shadow hag hut in the corrupted forests and recover an amulet that can be used to protect against the Shadowfell-like conditions of the dimension. When they get there, they find that the hag is busy preparing people for ritual sacrifices. It gave players a chance to sneak in, cause some distractions inside the hut to occupy the hag, and steal the amulet. Sounds great! The players are doing awesome. The Mission Impossible theme is playing as they narrowly manage to grab the amulet. This is when the player decides she is going to go back for the hostages. I loved it, and gave her inspiration for role-playing her flaw. The other players argue a bit in character, but ultimately decide they'll help from a distance, as at this point, they were out of spells and tools to do a stealth again. She agreed and said not to worry, she has a plan.
It's a cunning plan, actually. Of course it is.
I really love how supportive the GM is being like, yeah, sure, let's play that out. This is awesome. But when your whole party is out of spells, it might be wise to come back later.
It's possible you think they're on a time frame. If they're being prepared for sacrifices, you don't know when they're going to actually be sacrificed.
It's true.
So there's a definite pause for urgency here if you are someone who would be set on rescuing the hostages. And like the GM said, that's a great way to kind of play this out if that was deemed to be a character flaw. At least if the player saw it as a character flaw. I'm just very concerned about this cunning plan.
Yeah, it's never reassuring when somebody's like, it's okay, I have a plan. Oh.
Yeah, you care to share that with the party before we could do anything?
That's not ominous at all.
Her plan? She walked out in the open and challenged the Shadow Hag. I asked her twice if she was sure. Once as a narrator. You consider it might be dangerous to do so. Are you sure? And another as a GM. Just to clear the air, Shadow Hags are extremely dangerous. Challenge rating 13. Are you sure you wish to challenge them in their lair? Both were met with confirmation by the player. So they challenged the Shadow Hag. She got Finger of Death cast on her and died instantly.
Wow, nobody saw that coming.
No, that was entirely unpredictable the way this ended.
The one thing I will say, maybe I just don't understand the game mechanics of what the GM's playing here, but why aren't these creatures killable? Because like they said, like don't engage unless you have like a plan and all that.
Well, OP says at the beginning, they're intending this to be a problem-solving more campaign. They seem to really know what they are doing, so it sounds like they have been very good at providing them plenty of solutions to challenges other than fighting. And that's a very valid way to run a campaign.
Yeah, when the GM says twice, are you sure you want to do this? You listen. That's your cue to go, you know what? Maybe a few people should die.
That's your get out of jail free card from the GM. That is them being very, very clear that this is a bad idea and you should not do it in this way.
Especially if you're saying, this is the challenge rating, it's a 13. I don't know what level the party was at, but it sounds like they were not at a super high level if it was just a few sessions after session 0.
For challenge rating 13 to be instantly fatal and to be completely avoided, they'll still be at pretty low levels. The player went silent, and while I described her death and went to do my normal, PC died, what next? Talk, the player broke down and started insulting me. calling me sexist for her character dying. Apparently, I didn't want to see women succeed in my game because why would the hag have such powerful spells? She also said that I wanted to humiliate her because I narrated that her character dies and turns into a zombie. I explained that neither were true. Other women in the game were not dead, and my feminine presenting NPCs often hold positions of power. I had no intention to humiliate her. I described her death very briefly and reminded her that we have a safety card system she could use to make me stop and skip anything uncomfortable at any time.
It makes it that much harder for the rest of us that are trying to get our voices heard when you have people that are weaponizing feminism because they're upset about something.
Very clearly the Game Master is not being sexist here. At least they are the OP, so we are obviously getting their side of the story, but from the sounds of things, it doesn't sound like there's any grey areas. If they did indeed give them that much warning, and it had been very clear from the beginning of the campaign that combat was to be avoided at all costs, then this wasn't sexism. This was her own fault.
And to be honest, I think the GM was even being a little bit merciful by just making it quick and painless.
Yeah, they were definitely being merciful. Game Masters don't need to give you that much warning, but in this specific instance, when you're doing something so extremely reckless, it's perfectly reasonable for the GM to do that, and something I'd consider pretty standard.
I mean, here's the thing. It could be that the GM is sexist and there's something that we're not seeing, but somehow I doubt that.
In the end, she wouldn't listen to me. She ended up leaving, which I was disappointed with, and I apologized to her for it not working out. Asked for feedback, and thought that was that. It wasn't. She harassed the 2 women still in my group, and when they mentioned that she was crossing the line, she called them awful names and leaped over the line by saying to the trans woman, content warning transphobia, she wouldn't have been mad about it if she was a real woman. Safe to say I did not expect things to turn out this way. She was promptly added to my ban list of people I will never play again.
Wow. That's... Okay, so this is really funny when she's like, you're being sexist, and then she's harassing the other women in the campaign. And then when they don't agree with her, she's like, you guys are awful, horrible people.
This is very apparent. It's just about her own hurt feelings and doesn't know how to handle her emotions. Look, we're all upset when our characters die. It can be very personally painful, but she doesn't know how to handle that and is now just lashing out.
And being transphobic on top of it.
For those interested, the campaign had combat in it. I just showed them that combat often has to be very carefully planned and cautious. I am fully aware that a monk or fighter will feel like they don't belong otherwise. Prior to this, their first combat encounter was about finding hidden passages that allowed them to get an ambush from height on a patrol, instantly invalidating about half of the enemies who only had melee attacks and had to climb up all the way. Combat still happened and did so with decent frequency. It's just that I consider finding ways to make the combat much easier to be avoiding it. And when I mentioned it in the post, taking it on, I meant like just saying screw it and jumping in with no prep. The latter of which I mentioned multiple times to be a completely bad idea, often resulting in player character death or TPK. I told them there will always be ways to avoid the encounter or make it easier on yourself.
I'm glad that they clarified that about the combat, because I was a little bit like, if you're going to have martial classes and do all of that, then maybe let's have some combat. But also, seeing as how they had a 0 and a 0.5 session, I think they probably would have discussed it. So it's one of those things of like, if you don't like it, don't join.
They planned out very well having that many pre-sessions. So therefore, I really don't believe that it wasn't clear what this kind of campaign was. That you shouldn't just go charging in, absolutely headless, and challenge super powerful creatures head on. And as you say, they did allow martial classes, so there has to be room for combat. Mm-hmm. Just as the Game Master says, you need to prepare for this combat. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
We all like to do things differently. If that's how the GM likes to run a game, or wants to run a game just for lols, fine, fair. As long as everybody knows, which I think they did. So clearly this person was just being a Mary Sue and then got butthurt when she didn't get to be the hero.
Yeah, I don't think OP is in the wrong here. I don't think the Game Master's in the wrong. Sounds like a very thorough account, and honestly, this person just did not know how to handle their feelings when the time came and quickly went to abuse.
We've all been there. We've all lost characters or almost lost characters. And it is scary because you put your heart and your soul into some of these characters. And so when you see them not performing the way that you thought that they would, it can be a little bit of a shock to the system. GM is fair and unbiased during PvP by Reddit user PureGiraffe2081. I was playing with this group for 3 years in the same universe as another group by the same GM. 2 groups sometimes affecting each other in universe, and at the end was supposed to be the big conflict between the 2 groups. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's it's ambitious. It's hard enough to get one group of people to play together, but then when you're trying to coordinate 2, especially when they're all coming together at the end, I mean, ambitious. I mean, I'll give you props for ambition there, GM. It's a cool concept, but how you pull that off is oof.
Yeah. Of note, my party was arguably the more evil one. We've done some bad things, and we've generally gone our own way, which does set us up for this final conflict with the good group. Also, there's some strange homebrew items in our party. Specifically, a coat that allows all of us to merge into one, each taking our own turns inside the body, moving, taking actions, taking the greatest of AC saving throws.
I mean, we don't know anything about multiple creatures living inside one coat.
Nope. That's
No,
weird. That's very weird.
That's weird. Why would you do that? I don't know. No.
No, absolutely not. At this final session, we were hanging out in a town we were building when the big bad GM-controlled NPC appears with the other group. So it's us versus the other party and the GM's NPC. Also with the other party are 4 wizards that surround the battle arena, holding a shield up to prevent our allies from getting in. Notably, the DM would frequently use these NPC wizards to cast counterspell at 9th level for the benefit of the other party.
Okay, so why is the big bad NPC fighting with a good aligned party for one? And why do they get 4 wizards to help back them up?
Yeah, I feel like this is already stacked against the quote-unquote evil group.
To be fair, they haven't actually mentioned the size of the parties. So it could very well be that OP's party is much larger, and they need to balance it out somehow. There could be circumstances here that are mitigating, that could require such a, seemingly quite drastic balancer.
Maybe. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Maybe, let's see.
We kill their cleric, and the GM jumps in to decide that when one of us dies, they get a legendary action to do one thing, and he mass heals his party. Okay, fine. They kill one of us, and she heals us as well.
A minor concern point there. Surely something like that should have been established before the battle begins.
Yeah, that's not really a good thing to add in last minute.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool rule, you know. It can add quite a bit of an interesting dimension to that.
Go out in a blaze of glory.
But it really should have been clarified beforehand, and the way OP writes it here, it sounds like the GM last minute inserted it.
During the fight, in a critical moment where an athletics check would decide if we lost, the GM decided to allow the other party to use their inspirations to make us re-roll the check. This has no precedent in the campaign. We've never used inspirations offensively. We rolled well enough anyway to win about 4 re-rolls as the other party used their inspirations on our athletics check. And then, the GM said that he'd been keeping track of the joke inspirations that we had awarded to him throughout the campaign, and he started using inspirations to make us re-roll. So, the GM explicitly making us re-roll using his inspirations to try and kill our party. We survive anyway.
Okay, yeah, that is really now starting to feel like the GM is pulling all the stops to make them not win.
First of all, I don't really understand the whole using your inspirations to make other people re-roll. What's with that?
I mean, as I understand it, that's not how any kind of inspiration works. Now, obviously you have bardic inspiration.
Right.
But there is also inspiration that game masters can give out as a reward to players. If a player does some really good role-playing, does something particularly cool and pulls it off, the GM can just say, hey, have an inspiration dice. And you can hold on to that for as long as you want.
Using inspiration to make people re-roll. Basically what you're doing is giving them a free silvery barbs.
Yeah, there are certain class features out there that can force an opponent to make re-rolls. maybe a feat, but this is definitely not how any kind of inspiration works. Unless, of course, they said that's how something would work during the campaign. However, OP seems to quite explicitly say that is not the precedent of how these inspirations are to work.
So then, we gain an advantage, revivifying one of the dead party members and polymorphing her to keep her alive. This was not counterspelled because the wizard had used up their reactions. At the top of the next round, the GM tells us that a ring on the dead cleric's finger starts glowing. The GM-controlled NPC, Big Bad, who was at the top of the initiative, then retrieves the ring and reveals to us that it is a ring of 3 wishes, which recharges every 100 years, which had elapsed just now. He, the DM, then uses the ring to wish for our party to be dead. After that, the GM and the other party gleefully describe how they use the other wishes to undo all the things that we've done over the 3 real-life years in this campaign. GM swears up and down that he was completely unbiased, and it could have been either way.
Sorry, I'm just a bit stunned at what I've just heard there. The Big Bad pulls a ring off the cleric's finger, which just that second had refreshed after 100 years to grant the party 3 wishes.
That's super convenient.
This is the ultimate Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it just elapsed right now. Whew, wow.
Yeah, and then not only does that completely make the whole battle pointless, to have a function there where they could just completely have made anything that happened in that battle irrelevant, they then go on to have that entire group's campaign erased from the lore by the other group.
I have no words for that, because it's like, why would you do that? Like, do you actually have it out for that particular side of the party? Like, has the GM been actually harboring resentment against these players and decided to, in their final battle, just screw them over and erase their existence?
Yeah, OP says that they were a more evil party. They had done more bad things. However, at the end, they were building a village, so they clearly couldn't have been that bad and maybe had learned from their ways a bit.
It was an evil village?
It was an evil village of evil people.
I don't know. And to be frank, I don't think that anybody really can understand why a DM would do that.
Almost feels like bullying. A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
It just feels like the GM had it out for them, and then the other party just used the power to completely have made the last 3 years of playing completely irrelevant.
There's always GMs, players that are like, oh, well, if you're playing an evil character, then they're a bad person.
Well, they don't specify that they're evil aligned, just that they had been leaning that way more and doing more things that were that way. So it's not even necessarily that they were evil aligned.
Yeah, that's the only shred of logic that I can, and it's not logical, but it's the only shred of logic that I can find as to why the DM would think that that's a brilliant idea that everybody would just really like, and that people would 100% believe that he was being completely unbiased.
If it was coming down to that one athletics roll at the end to determine the winner, clearly the other things that the DM had put out against them hadn't worked, and maybe they might have been balancing. At that point, if it had come down to one thing where either side could win, it could very well have been balancing, and I could have believed it was balancing at that point. If they, despite all of that, they still could have won. But the GM just had an erase button.
Yeah, the GM was like, I don't like this, so, bye. Hey, Hugh.
Yes, man.
Why does everybody like healers?
I don't know. Why do they like healers?
Because they're the life of the party.
And with that, we have definitely not been
Two kobolds in a trench coat.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make the necessary sacrifices to Tiamat. We'll see you next time.